Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here. We have got a lot to cover over the next couple of hours, and hope you'll be able to join me for the entire 3 hours. This hour, we're going to spend some time, first of all, just looking at a couple of the articles I've posted on our website, pointofview.net. Then we'll be talking with the state Senator Angela Paxton, representing the Senate District 8, who also is married to Ken Paxton. We'll be talking about the Attorney General and some of the issues on abortion. We'll be talking about the latest announcement by the governor. So we'll get into some of those issues of Greg Abbott and the rest, and we'll get into some other conversations as we look ahead to the campaign. She is not having to run for re-election, being a state senator, but certainly has perspective on what, first of all, is going to happen in the campaigns. Number two, I think we'll come back to this issue of redistricting, because that will change her life and everybody else's life, and that will be taking place. And I think just underscores again why it is very important for you to pay attention to not only who's running for president, for Congress, and even for the state legislature all the way down, because these are individuals that are going to be making decisions that will affect you as well. Then, as we go into our national hour, starting at 1 o'clock, Chelsey Youman will be joining us for an hour. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the millennial roundtable issues, but also, since she, of course, is very much involved in the pro-life issue, we'll talk about some of the decisions that have been coming down just in that regard, whether abortion facilities are essential services. Then Gary Bauer will be with us from about 1:15 to 1:45, and we'll be talking about many of his comments in his end-of-day report. And, of course, Brad Fisk will also join us as well. And then, if that's not enough, and then the third hour, or the second national hour, that will be Eric Metaxas will be with us. So it is a very busy day with a lot of different voices, and I hope that as we go through this, you will recognize that we are also in the midst of our Truth Team Week, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But our first article is fairly lengthy. I took the time to print out all 10 pages. You might want to just print out the first 2 pages. But it comes from the Pew Research Center, telling us what I think we already know, and that is the coronavirus outbreak has very definitely impacted our lives. Let me just give you a few of the comments that were made. For example, they found that about 9 in 10, 91% of adults say that given the current situation, they say they would feel uncomfortable attending a crowded party. Although I have seen a number of people go into crowded bars and restaurants until they finally close those down. But nevertheless, most people right now picking up this idea of course, social distancing. Number two, we also have found that 77%, would not really want to eat out at a restaurant. I mean, it's almost like, we watch a movie at home and we say, I remember when we used to go to a restaurant and sit down and eat there. I used to go to a sporting event and actually sit next to someone. But that is the case. But most importantly, in light of some of the conversations we're going to have today in terms of the campaign, we are in the midst of a presidential election year, as well as, of course, you have 34 U.S. senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives, all sorts of state legislatures, 11 governor's races, on and on and on. Two-thirds say they wouldn't feel comfortable going to a polling place to vote. Now, think this through for just a minute. We are fortunate that we had most of our primaries sort of front-loaded, but that's going to be a question about what are the rest of the primaries going to do. Could we just simply have people vote by mail? Would the November election be a vote by mail? All sorts of really important questions that we will certainly get to as time unfolds here on Point of View. And a smaller, but still a substantial number say, I feel even uncomfortable going to a grocery store. That was 42%, or even visiting a close friend or family member in their house, 38%. So this has changed behavior in dramatic ways. And I want to get to the second article if we have time, or maybe we'll get to it later, on setting a precedent. But let's also talk about this because it has also affected the way in which we worship. More than half of all adults, 55%, say they have prayed for an end of the spread of the coronavirus. A large majorities who pray daily, 86%, and Christians, 73%, have taken to prayer during the outbreak. But so have, interestingly enough, people that say that they seldom or never pray have actually prayed during the outbreak. So that's kind of interesting. And it, of course, has affected churches' services as well. About 59% now say they have scaled back their attendance because of the coronavirus. And in many cases, of course, presumably, because churches, synagogues, mosques, others, houses of worship have canceled services. But that doesn't necessarily mean they've disengaged. A similar percentage, 57%, report having watched religious services online or on TV instead of attending in person. And so, if nothing else, you can basically say that at least 4 in 10 regular worshipers have merely replaced in-person attendance with virtual worship. And so I thought that was kind of intriguing. And if you'd like to know a little bit more, maybe one of these days I'll get to some of these others, because they found that there's a real difference between Republicans and Democrats about the virus. Republicans are more likely than Democrats to say they feel comfortable going about many of their activities. Democrats are very fearful. As a matter of fact, there's one whole section here where it says half of Democrats say their life has changed in a marriage your way, and they are probably sometimes the least likely to go out of the home. So that's kind of intriguing. But it also brings me to the second article that I'll just mention in passing. We'll get into it a little bit later. But it's by Andrew Studiford, who's been somebody I've quoted before. And he's actually, at the moment, was looking at the UK, but it applies so well to the United States, because in an interview with Lord Sumpton, who is a retired Supreme Court justice in the United Kingdom, he said, the real problem is that when human societies lose their freedom, it's not usually because of tyrants who've taken it away. It's usually because people willingly surrender their freedom in return for protection against some external threat. And the threat is usually a real threat, but usually exaggerated. And that's what he says I fear now seeing. The pressure on politicians has come from the public. They want action. They don't pause to ask whether that action will work. They don't ask themselves whether the cost will be worth paying. And, of course, one of the things that Andrew Studiford says is that in some respects, if you go back and look at history, and I'm going to maybe even do a commentary on this, he says it's a matter of historical fact that governments have oftentimes been reluctant to give up powers they've been handed, even during a crisis. To imagine that large swaths of America, he says, would be shut down by administrative order would 6 months ago have been the stuff of preppers, those people preparing for a cataclysm, paranoia, and yet here we are. And the powers that have been used once can be used again, perhaps not in the same way, perhaps not in the same extent, but they can be used, and an emergency can be conveniently flexible. And, of course, one example he uses is already we're closing down the opportunity for many people to purchase a handgun, for example, and Second Amendment issues. And if nothing else, I wanted to post these articles for you to read, and we will probably come back to them sometime today. If not, we will certainly get on to those conversations once again on our Friday weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford to be with us. But when we come back, we're going to talk with State Senator Angela Paxton, a graduate of Baylor University and also an individual that has a master's degree from the University of Houston, former teacher, but also an individual now in the legislature, and get some perspective on a couple of the events transforming our world around us. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Whether you are a Christian or not, you are benefiting from the positive impact of Christianity on your life. That's the premise of the book by Dr. Rodney Stark, America's Blessings, How Religion Benefits Everyone, Including Atheists. His book is a perfect response to atheistic professors who criticize America and the Christian foundation of this country. This book is a natural one for the professor to write since he has talked about the positive contribution of Christianity to Western civilization. Since we live in a country that Stark believes is unusually religious, we shouldn't be surprised that many of the blessings that Christianity has brought to the world can be found in America. He says people who attend church tend to donate more than others. In previous commentaries, I've talked about the research by Arthur Brooks that found the same things. Rodney Stark says that religious people dominate the ranks of blood donors, to whom even some angry humanists owe their lives. Christians also are far more likely to contribute even to secular charities, to volunteer their times for socially beneficial programs, and to be active in civic affairs. Religious Americans also enjoy better physical health. They have an average life expectancy more than 7 years longer than those of the irreligious. In fact, much of the difference remains even after the effects of clean living are removed. Rodney Stark also talks about another topic we've discussed in previous commentaries, the fertility gap. The fertility rate for religious people is much higher than for secular people. He cites Eric Kaufman's book, Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth? That book points out that when you look at Europe, the population is declining, except in the religious sector. Despite what you might hear from atheists and skeptics, Christianity has been a blessing to America and the world. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Point of View Truth Team, Liberty or Tyranny.
Hello, I'm Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown Financial Ministries. I so appreciate the great work of Kerby Anderson and the Point of View team. Every day they step into the public arena to make a stand for truth by shedding biblical light on the issues that confront us all. Never backing away or compromising on the truth, they're making a difference for you, for me, and the next generation. It's important that we Christians put our money behind those causes that are having a meaningful impact. My wife and I personally support Point of View, and we encourage you to do the same.
Good friend Chuck Bentley, and again, we are in the midst of Truth Team Week, and we encourage you to consider what you might do to support this ministry. And as we go through this interview that we're going to do with Senator Angela Paxton, you can go to our website, pointofview.net. Click on that banner. It says Liberty and Tyranny, and you'll find out that if you join us at the Truth Team level, which can be as little as $1 a day or $30 a month, you'll receive, of course, the Outlook magazine, this flash drive that includes, as we've pointed out before, 24 of my Viewpoints commentaries, a dozen of the booklets that we make available, as well as a number of the best programs we've done, almost 11 hours worth of content, as well as, I think it's 59 pages of things from our Outlook magazine, all intended to give you great material. And in addition to that, we also make available the spellbinding novel, The Jerusalem Assassin, book by Joel Rosenberg, was with us last week. We now have a chance to talk a little bit about what is happening in the state of Texas in particular, and also we might even focus on Collin County, since that has been in the news up until recently. So we bring to the microphone Senator Angela Paxton, a graduate of Baylor University with a master's degree from the University of Houston, representing the 8th Senatorial District in the state of Texas. And Angela, always great to have you on the program with us.
Well, thank you, Kerby. It's great to be here. I appreciate so much what you do to really promote liberty and in the consciousness of people, keeping it ever before us. And we all know, right, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And thanks for being part of that.
Well, again, our theme is liberty or tyranny, and later on when we get into our national hour, we'll talk about some of that with Gary Bauer, later with Eric Metaxas, because don't have quite as many socialists in the state of Texas, had a few that get close, but nationwide, that is certainly an issue. But let's talk about I have in front of me here the order that was rescinded by the county judge of Cullen County, and the reason for that is, and the reason Chris Hill has now rescinded that, is because Governor Greg Abbott has issued his own declaration, and that I thought maybe you could give us some perspective on, because I know from time to time you're on conference calls and interact with various individuals, and of course, being married to Ken Paxton, you probably know a little bit more about some of these issues than others, but it does seem to me now that we have something that looks at least a little bit like shelter in place for the entire state. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, part of what we all noticed about the governor's order yesterday and Judge Hill's order for Cullen County, that they stopped short of calling this a shelter in place, a shelter at home, and I think both of those folks have really tried to walk the fine line between keeping the economic engine going without putting bigger stress or heavier stress on the public health situation that we're dealing with. So I think that would be kind of what I would say. As you know, we still have counties in Texas that don't have any cases at all. But what we're really trying to navigate here is the fact that, we're not there right now, but the trajectory of the public health crisis is that the public health or hospitals could be overwhelmed at a certain point if we don't mitigate and minimize the number of people who are potentially going to be in the hospital. So we're not there now. It's the sort of thing, that we all deal with, with I guess you might say immediate gratification. Well, right now, it's not the problem yet, but right now isn't what we're looking at. We're looking at the future. So, I think both officials have been trying to do that, but at the same time, recognizing that the threat is growing, the situation is getting more serious. And so, obviously, the governor's order supersedes the county judge's order. And so he immediately rescinded his to be in compliance with the state.
I might just mention, too, that we have a link to your webpage, and you have put out a number of special editions, and one that just came out recently, which I know you'll probably update in the next few days, gives a little bit of understanding of that as well. But I wanted to call upon your background, not only as an individual married to somebody who's been involved in the legislature for some time, but your background as a teacher. And we find ourselves right now in an interesting set of circumstances, because a lot of parents who probably never thought that they would be homeschooling find themselves in that situation. And so in some respects, given the fact that now it is pretty obvious that the governor has moved the next deadline out so far, I think that we are talking about pretty much homeschooling until next fall. But what about that? And what advice might you give to some of the parents listening right now that are saying, I got kids at home. How do I do this? Maybe you can give them some encouragement and maybe some advice.
Well, that's really true, Kerby. And there are so many things that this crisis really does bring to a head and causes us to look deeply at. And it's interesting. The legislative session that we just held, one of the bills that I carried was a virtual schooling bill,
yes,
just to expand the opportunity for public school students to have access to coursework that wasn't available in person on their campus. And we were not able to get that passed because there there was just opposition, I think, from people who felt like that would undermine public schooling for some reason. I think one of the first things you have to ask yourself about anything related to education is, does this help kids learn? Does this increase their ability to learn? That's the question.
Yeah.
I'm not protecting turf or anything like that. But having said that, it's very interesting where we find ourselves now, because every school, public, private, homeschool, everyone needs the ability to educate in a virtual manner to some extent. And so I think that creates actually a lot of exposure that people are having with doing this. And I think it will relieve a lot of fear and actually give people a different perspective that this actually opens up opportunity for kids to learn. But you are right. My background as an educator included teaching in public schools and private school, and also we homeschooled our kids up through early elementary.
Sure.
And I remember when we were entering into that world, I remember the concerns, what about the gaps? What about, how do I do this well? And I had a background as an educator, but I was a math teacher. And how am I going to teach my children to read? But you know what? I did. And I found resources. And so I think, on this note, I actually called Tim Lambert a couple weeks ago and spoke with him directly, because I said, hey, the whole world is homeschooling now, and you know stuff that a lot of people are dying to know. And I do want to point your listeners to a couple of resources that the Texas Homeschool Coalition has put out for folks who find themselves all of a sudden teaching from home. The public schools and the private schools are doing a great job of pushing out content and supporting their parents as best they can. You may not know this, but of our 4 children, our 2 youngest are either an educator or studying to be an educator. And our number 3 child is teaching dyslexic kids right now. And it's her very first teaching assignment. And almost immediately, she started in February, and almost immediately they went into this mode. So, it's a challenge for our teachers to do this, and it's also a challenge for parents. But Texas Homeschool Coalition has a website called coronavirushomeschooling.com.
Very good.
Coronavirushomeschooling.com. They also have a Facebook page called Coronavirus Homeschool Support. Coronavirus Homeschool Support. If you go there, you can ask to join that community.
Good. Let me take a break, and when we come back, and we'll see if we can even post those during the break here and make that available. But we have one of those mandatory breaks, and I'm so glad that I asked this question, because I know some of you are looking for educational help. Tim Lambert and others are certainly at the top of the list of people to consult. So we'll be back right after this.
What I'm about to say is not for everyone. If you've lost a job and wondering how you're going to provide for yourself and your family, it's not for you. Our prayers are with you. If you're one of our generous donors whose business has been hit hard by the current struggles, it's probably not for you. In recent days, we've seen so many victories for liberty, but those who value power above all else do not sleep during a crisis. They try to take advantage of it. You can help ensure that Point of View Radio is here as a source of good information and solid practical help in a time of great need. If you can, stand with us by visiting pointofview.net/team. There you can read all about the benefits, whether you can give monthly or as a special investment at this critical time. Pointofview.net/team. During this difficult moment, let's make sure liberty wins. If you prefer to give by phone, please be patient. You can imagine things are a bit more challenged than usual. 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or again online, pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
You know, Philippians 4:6 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God." And certainly some are anxious during this time with COVID-19 and the coronavirus. Sometimes you're just anxious because all of a sudden you say, I'm going to have to homeschool my kids. I don't even know how to do this. So we're going to put up a link that was suggested by Senator Angela Paxton to Tim Lambert and the Texas Homeschool Coalition. Matter of fact, you might even follow a little video that he's put together, how to homeschool during COVID-19, that Tim Lambert did. It's only about 2 minutes long, and so we'll have some of those links up there on our website, pointofview.net. And, of course, we also have a link to Angela Paxton's page where you can read some of her newsletters. But I love your comment. I mean, you were a trained teacher, but then when all of a sudden it came time to homeschool your kids, you go, I might need some help, too. So you can imagine why there's a little bit of anxiety on the part of some parents who have no degree in education. And so, if nothing else, I really thank you for giving us that suggestion of going to some of the material by Tim Lambert.
Well, you're welcome. And, I do think, one of the things that all of us have just a window into is, number one, realizing that it's a great responsibility to make sure that we educate our children well. And every parent wants their kid to get a good education. And so I just want to kind of give a shout out to all of those teachers out there who every day, they go and they work with groups of kids. We know what it's like in our homes right now to be teaching individual children. We've got much smaller class sizes than most of our teachers in public and private schools, and it's very challenging. And so I think everyone would agree. Thank you to all of our teachers who do this so well and with great diligence and care every day. And especially I want to commend my own daughter, Maddie, who is a first-year teacher and dyslexic herself, worked to overcome that, and now she teaches dyslexic children. It's a
So
great
good.
story, but all of our teachers, thank you all so much.
Let's, if we can, maybe get into a couple of other issues. One of those, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more when we have Chelsey in next hour. She'll be joining us, and we oftentimes talk about the Millennial Roundtable, but also, of course, being the state director of the Human Coalition. We have seen kind of a back and forth, and that is you have, of course, the governor, Greg Abbott, who said that any kind of non-essential surgical procedure needs to be postponed. And then you had the argument being made by one federal judge that basically said, well, but that should not apply to the subject of abortion, and so issued an injunction against this and allowed abortion facilities to stay open. And by that time, of course, you also had your husband, the Attorney General, trying to clarify that. But then the good news that came down yesterday is from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Two of those judges said, no, we're going to issue a stay in that regard and still keep those closed. What I think is kind of interesting is that up until yesterday, we had, for example, Rick Santorum on here saying that an individual that needed to get what is considered non-essential heart surgery would have to wait, but a person that wanted to get an abortion was allowed to go into an abortion clinic. And, of course, he was talking primarily about other states than Texas. But I just think, again, it illustrates how this whole issue of abortion surfaces even during this pandemic of the coronavirus. Amazing.
Well, it really is. And, I love the work of the Human Coalition, and I think their strategic approach and just fantastic mission that they have is perfectly embodied in Chelsey Youman, who you're going to be talking with soon. And she is a wonderful woman, a mother herself, an attorney. She's brilliant and compassionate. One of the things I think I have thought about a lot and talked with one of our youngest daughter who is home from A&M, also in a situation where she is online schooling right now as a college student and is going to be a teacher. She's also the president of the Pro-Life Aggies at Texas A&M. And, you know, Katie and I were talking about this very thing just yesterday. You know, an abortion takes a life, and it is not the best solution to a pregnancy that wasn't planned. And, you know, I've shared a little bit of my story. I was an unplanned pregnancy myself. And so I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to live, to be a voice for those babies who are unborn. But, you know, the other side of this is that in every case, there is a woman who is in crisis and a woman who is seeking an abortion. What we know is that abortion-seeking women, 75 to 80% of them say if their circumstances were different, they wouldn't be seeking the abortion.
Yes.
So well over most women, this is not their plan A. It's not what they want to do. They just don't know what else to do in their situation. And so the work of the Human Coalition is so important, and the opportunity to help assist these women, matching them with the resources that they don't know they have, is so critical and so strategic and so compassionate in the deepest kind of way. It's a real solution to the woman's problem of not knowing how to move forward in pregnancy. But there is no denying. I mean, a woman who finds herself pregnant, doesn't know what to do, thought maybe abortion was a way, her choices have now been limited. And I'm telling you, abortion is not a good choice. But psychologically, this increases the duress, right? Because a woman now is like, you know, I could have been thinking about that. I might have been going on and on. Her pregnancy is progressing. And so I don't think we can underestimate or overstate the duress that a woman is in an unplanned pregnancy right now, and compassion and real love that will help her meet the needs that will really address her situation are so important, and I'm appreciative of the work of the Human Coalition in that way.
Very good. You know, one of the things that we make available to our donors is this little booklet. Each time we have a different one. Some of the most recent ones have been on civil disobedience, pornography. This is the one on abortion. And you might say, well, goodness, there are all sorts of other good resources. Matter of fact, at the back, I give you what I think are the 5 best books on the subject, but it tries to help you understand what are the biblical arguments against abortion, medical arguments against abortion, legal arguments against abortion, philosophical arguments against abortion, and even what about some of the exceptions. So one of the benefits of supporting Point of View is each month we send you a different booklet that I have written. In a few cases, Penna Dexter has written. In the case of the pornography one, Warren Kelly has. But these are resources that we make available. And just before I let you go, certainly, Angela, you have been listening to Point of View for some time. You've been on the program with us many times. We're encouraging our people and our listeners, especially this week, to support this ministry. What would you say to them? Why is it important to support Point of View?
Well, as we began, I mean, your emphasis highlighting the critical issue of liberty versus tyranny is so important, and it plays out in very specific ways in our daily lives. We're talking about those things right now. You know, there is a proportional relationship between freedom and risk. And, you know, you can have less risk if you're willing to have less freedom, right? And when you increase freedom, you do increase risk. And that's part of what we're doing right now in this emergency is we're trying to find a balance of what we need to do. You'll notice we do it for a temporary amount of time just to control a specific thing. And we have expiration dates on all of these orders so that we can protect freedom. And I appreciate what you do. You know, and another thing, if I could just say real quick, I wonder about the fact that April 1st, April Fool's Day, is also the official census day. But I don't want to go off without reminding everyone to please go online to my2020census.gov and to do their census.
For sure. And we were going to talk about
that
that later, because I don't want the census taker to have to come to your door. You can do it online, and today is the day in which, if you haven't already done it, most of us have, then do it today. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Angela, I
It's
appreciate
10
you
minutes.
joining us. This has just been a great conversation, and I hope we can do it again. We're coming up on a break, and if people would like to know a little bit more about Senator Angela Paxton, you can simply go to the website pointofview.net, click on her picture, and she is there, and you can find some of her newsletters. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thanks, Kerby.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into a couple of other issues. And as I gave you a little bit of an overview, next hour, of course, we're going to be talking with Gary Bauer. And also, we'll have Chelsey Youman in studio, and we have a lot more to cover. We'll do that right after this.
Point of View Truth Team, Liberty or Tyranny.
My name is Kwasi Agbota. I heard this for the first time driving through Alabama 5 minutes ago as I'm returning to Detroit. I was very touched. It stands out as timeless in its approach. I greatly appreciated that. I was moved by it, and so I called to give my testimony. And I was very curious about a lot of the same issues and timeless truth and contemporary application. So I thank God for what you all are doing, and I want to encourage you all that you are reaching perhaps a much broader audience than you might believe. God bless you.
Isn't that a great story? Just driving through Alabama, heading back to Detroit. There are places in Michigan where you can hear the program, but if nothing else, always love to hear from sometimes first-time listeners. Sometimes since they don't understand the context, they react sometimes before they understand all the details. But let's just for a minute, since we were talking with Senator Angela Paxton, she did mention something I was going to talk about in the National Hour, but I need to talk about it right now, even for those of you in the state of Texas or the few other listeners around the country. Today, April 1st, is not only April Fool's Day, it is Census Day. Now, I suspect many of you already have received some kind of envelope in the mail that said United States Census 2020. And if you were the kind of person who doesn't procrastinate, then that means you may have already gone online and filled it out. But if you have not, let's do it today. No more procrastination. And there's a very good reason for that, because first of all, we need to get an accurate census. As I said just a minute ago with Senator Paxton, we really don't want to send a census worker to your door, especially during the coronavirus, or any reason why you can't fill that out. It's very simple. It's a simple form, and do so. And what, of course, this does is that this is, first of all, required by the Constitution that we have a census every 10 years. And more importantly, let's talk about those of you listening in the state of Texas. It's going to redraw all sorts of lines. We will have 3 new members of Congress in the House of Representatives, so that's going to be important. But it's not only going to draw those lines, it's also going to draw the lines for the state legislature, for the State Board of Education, all sorts of various courts. I suspect because Angela Paxton represents an area that has grown dramatically, maybe her Senate district will shrink a little bit because the numbers will have increased dramatically in those areas in Collin County. So that, of course, will mean something different. You may actually end up with a different state senator, maybe end up with a different state representative, and all of the rest. And, of course, a lot of this goes to what will happen in the state legislature next year, because they will actually come together to try to draw these lines. And that's no small task, as you may have noticed if you've listened to our broadcast before with Representative Phil King, or even if you saw my commentary that came out this time last week on March 25th, we point out some very interesting things, because you would think, well, you just fit a lot of boxes in there. Matter of fact, as Candy Noble was saying yesterday, well, no, it's a lot more complicated than that, because first of all, there's the political issues. Democrat legislators would like lines drawn, so there would be more Democratic districts. Republicans would like to have boundaries drawn so more Republicans could be elected. But then you also have various laws that require districts to try to follow county lines if they can. There are also individuals that would like to keep cities and towns and school districts together. Trying to get all that into a single district is really difficult. And if that's not complicated enough, some states, and unfortunately this state, as well as many others in the South, are affected by the Voting Rights Act, which was a very important piece of legislation back when we had all sorts of bias that was there, that was sort of anti-black, anti-African-American racial bias. But now, because it's still in effect in so many different places, then you have to provide the right for a person to vote based on race, ethnicity, language group. So there are just a lot of pressures that will be on the legislature next year. But the starting point is today. Make sure that you fill out your census. And as we go to a break, let me also mention that we have posted some very good articles, some of those having to do with this whole idea of federalism and the various situations. And our good friend, who is on the program many times, Dr. Merrill Matthews, sometimes not only as a co-host but a guest host, has pointed out that, of course, a lot of the reaction to this virus is at the state level, partially because it goes back to the 10th Amendment. Any powers not delegated to the United States are then actually reserved for the states and the people. And so there are certain enumerated powers, but the government, the federal government, has to be careful to recognize that in some respects the responsibility for a lot of this goes back to the states, which is why you're hearing in the case of Texas, the governor, Greg Abbott, or in the case of Dallas, Clay Jenkins as the county judge, or in Collin County, which we mentioned earlier, Chris Hill, doing most of the conversations about various requirements. And we talked about the fact that almost half of the counties in the state of Texas do not have a COVID-19 case. And if you look at it nationwide, a third of the counties have no COVID-19 cases. That's 1,297 counties in the United States do not have even one case of that. So there's got to be sort of a real balance between providing protection for individuals and allowing people to go on about their lives. And he has a very powerful quote from an individual, Ann Applebaum, in The Atlantic, and I'm going to go find the original here, in which she said, around the world, rulers are using the pandemic as an excuse to grab more power, and the public is going along with it. And, of course, once the crisis abates, you might say, the governments might want to keep those powers. So that gets us back to one of the articles that I've posted for you on the website, pointofview.net, that really recognizes that if nothing else, we might be accidentally setting a precedent. So we're going to come into that conversation in just a few minutes with first Chelsey on the abortion issue, then with Gary Bauer on what's happening nationwide, and then later with Eric Metaxas. And, of course, our good friend Brad Fisk will join us as well. But just before we take a break, let me just mention a couple of things. First of all, this is our Truth Team Week. And, of course, we do encourage you to consider what you might do to support this ministry. And if you've been listening to this broadcast from 12 to 1, we really need to hear from some of you, because we know that the audience is much larger when we start out at 1 o'clock. We then now go to 42 different states and 260 plus radio stations. But given the fact that this is a small number, we still need to hear from you. And so if you have been listening for some time and have not called in, I would encourage you to do so. The pledge line number is 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. And, of course, you can go to the website at any time, and that is pointofview.net. As I've mentioned before, we're making available, of course, this novel, the newest novel by Joel Rosenberg, just as a thank you gift. Of course, you'll receive the Outlook magazine. But one of the things I'm excited about is this flash drive. If you're watching right now on the various methods that we provide there, we have it both on Facebook Live as well as through our own various broadcast as well through satellite. You will see that, first of all, it has a carabiner. I love that, because then you can hook it onto your purse, your belt, or send it off with a young child, grandchild, niece, nephew, put it on their backpack when they go out to high school, college. And then, of course, it has USB and USB-C, so it has all sorts of great ways you can connect up to a computer. But most importantly, it has, as we've pointed out before, 16 different articles from Outlook, which ends up being about 59 pages. It has 19 of the best programs, which ends up being about 11 hours. 24 viewpoint radio commentaries, 12 booklets, and we make that available to you as a thank you gift for a gift of as little as $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. So as we go to a break, this would be a perfect time to call 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
I don't know about you, but I'm having trouble keeping track of what day it is. But here's what I do know. This week is very important in keeping good information flowing in the fight for liberty against tyranny. And the days are going by quickly. Again, if you've lost a job recently or your business has been hit hard, this is not for you. We're praying that God provides for you and has mercy to get things back to a sense of normal. But if you can, your investment today can help us preserve recent gains and stand tall against those who would try to use this crisis to advance their agenda. We need to hear from you right now. Monthly support is a lifeblood for us, but whether you can give monthly or make a special gift, please give right now. All the details are online at pointofview.net/team. And if you haven't been there lately or ever, after you give, look around. We have a lot of resources there. pointofview.net/team. Or by phone, 1-800-347-5151. Do your part for liberty. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. Over the next couple of hours, we're going to have a chance to hear from a variety of different guests. In about 15 minutes, Gary Bauer will be with us, and we'll be talking about some of his insights from Washington, D.C. And we also, of course, always encourage you to go to his end-of-day report. Next hour, we'll be talking to our good friend Eric Metaxas. Maybe he'll give us a little bit of a sense of what is happening in New York City, which is, of course, where he broadcasts from. And also in studio today, just privileged to have Chelsey Youman with us. And again, she is the Texas State Director and the National Legislative Advisor for Human Coalition. And I thought we might start there, Chelsey, because yesterday we had former Senator Rick Santorum pointing out the interesting irony that if an individual wanted to get heart surgery, if that was seen as elective, they would have to postpone that. But if an individual wants to kill their baby, go and get an abortion, that would still be open. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about how this has played out even in the state of Texas, because more recently, the governor in the state of Texas, Greg Abbott, issued an emergency order that basically required the postponement of all sorts of non-essential surgeries. And even the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, clarified some of that as well. But then you had a federal judge rule that, no, we have to actually have an injunction against this because, after all, we need to keep these abortion mills open. And so then the most recent one came down yesterday, which we found out, and that is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Some individuals that you actually probably know actually said, no, we're going to issue a stay on that. We certainly need to close down these abortion clinics. And I think it's just a good illustration that this issue of abortion is almost always treated as sort of a special case. Mm-hmm. If you apply this to any other medical procedure, we go, oh, well, that's elective and that can be postponed. But abortion, that's different, the case. And that's really what you've been working at in the Human Coalition, to provide resources for individuals that are wanting to save the baby rather than abort them in one of these abortion clinics.
Absolutely. I mean, Kerby, you always just hit the nail right on the head that abortion is not healthcare. It just isn't. It takes lives. It doesn't save lives. And in a time where every patient out there is being asked to make sacrifices for the healthcare industry and for capacity issues and for medical resources, that the abortion industry is still looking to gain a profit and to take advantage of women in times of uncertainty. And they are not exempt and should not be from the other sacrifices being asked of patients everywhere. I think through our clinic side, which I'm with Human Coalition Action, so we're the advocacy arm for our clinics, right, which is the largest pro-life nonprofit in the country. We serve women. We had 45 clinics across the country. We went to a virtual model over the weekend, 2 weekends ago, to be able to continue to serve women and help women instead of this make a profit off of them and the quick fix that abortion is. We come alongside them, and we had double the calls last week than we'd ever had before, because times of uncertainty and especially economic uncertainty drive up abortion demand. And so instead of saying, hey, there's a quick fix out there, let's profit off of these women who are in dire circumstances, we at Human Coalition just come alongside them and say, how can we help? Can we help you maintain a job? Can we help you with childcare? Can we help you with domestic violence? Whatever the scenario is, We come alongside women and create a support system and meet them where they're at for years, not just until the birth of the child, but up until 3 years afterwards if needed. So, there are answers out there for these women besides abortion. And another statistic I think that is just astounding is that in 2 weeks, if the state of Texas stops all abortions, more lives will be saved than coronavirus has taken thus far in the U.S.
Isn't that something?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
That's significant.
And it just shows you again how we almost take for granted the issue of abortion. And I thought I might just mention, for those of you watching online, I'm holding up this booklet on abortion. One of the things we make available to our donors, and some of the most recent ones have been on pornography and on civil disobedience and a variety of others. But this one on abortion is one that we've made available to our listeners because it talks about medical arguments against abortion, legal arguments against abortion, of course, biblical arguments against abortion, even what about exceptions. And it's just one of the resources we make available. And so as we're talking about some of those resources we like to put in the hands of some of our listeners, Brad Fisk also joins us by phone. And Brad, this is one of the reasons why we come to our listeners. We certainly are listener supported, but we also want to put in the hands of our listeners some great material. And so some of the material that's in this booklet, I understand, may actually be in the flash drive that we're making available for people that join us at the $1 a day, $30 a month Truth Team level. Isn't that true?
That's right. It's right. Let's say that again. It's $1 a day to join the Truth Team. That's $1 a day for a whole year. That's $360. And again, you don't have to pay that right now. You just call and pledge that amount. But what's really exciting is this flash drive is just loaded and very well organized, by the way, of topics, and it has a plethora of good information that you need, because that's one of the main tenets of Point of View Radio, is to give solid information so that you can continue to fight the battle with us as we seek biblical truth in our culture today. 800-347-5151. You want to go ahead and get that flash drive as a gift? $1 a day or more. 1-800-347-5151. You can also give online at pointofview.net.
Chelsey, you haven't seen this yet because this has got, as you can see here, a little like a carabiner. The idea is that you could hook this on your purse or your belt, or I'm saying if you're sending kids off to college or even in high school, they can click it on there. It has 2 different USB and USB-C, but what it has in there, just to take the abortion issue, which is certainly front and center, it has various articles about the impact of abortion. It's got the testimony of Abby Johnson, testimony of Don Blythe, a very good program, by the way, some teaching programs on that, and that's just on the political ones. We also have stuff on culture, the economy, all sorts of others. So if a young person is in there and they're having a debate about capitalism versus socialism, they go, oh, I wonder what they maybe have written on this subject, or they're saying, well, I just think that a woman should have a right to choose. Is there a good answer to that? It's all in there along with great theological material. And so that's just one of the things we've been making available to our listeners. And I thought when we come back from the break, we might spend some time talking with our good friend Gary Bauer, because as many of you know, Chelsey not only, of course, brings the pro-life conviction here, but you were sitting here recently doing the Millennial Roundtable, which was outstanding, by the way. And I'm looking forward to those opportunities in the future, because we really want to reach out to the Generation Y, Generation Z, and you had 2 experts, one kind of an expert on Generation Y, and then one on Generation Z, or the so-called iGen generation. So those are some of the things we're doing on Point of View. But Brad, just before we go to a break, let's talk about this, because as people go to a break, this would be a perfect time to make a phone call or visit the website, because they don't want to miss some of the things we're going to be talking about in just a minute with Gary Bauer.
That's true. And again, we want to be sensitive to those who are maybe out of work right now. There's a lot of unemployment and other things going on in people's lives. This may not be the right opportunity for you to give. That is fine. But there's others who are at home and they're receiving a salary and they're have an income coming in, and also might have an income coming in from the CARE Act in the next couple of weeks in the form of a government check. So here's the phone number to call right now, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, and on the net at pointofview.net.
We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Whether you are a Christian or not, you are benefiting from the positive impact of Christianity on your life. That's the premise of the book by Dr. Rodney Stark, America's Blessings, How Religion Benefits Everyone, Including Atheists. His book is a perfect response to atheistic professors who criticize America and the Christian foundation of this country. This book is a natural one for the professor to write since he has talked about the positive contribution of Christianity to Western civilization. Since we live in a country that Stark believes is unusually religious, we shouldn't be surprised that many of the blessings that Christianity has brought to the world can be found in America. He says people who attend church tend to donate more than others. In previous commentaries, I've talked about the research by Arthur Brooks that found the same things. Rodney Stark says that religious people dominate the ranks of blood donors, to whom even some angry humanists owe their lives. Christians also are far more likely to contribute even to secular charities, to volunteer their times for socially beneficial programs, and to be active in civic affairs. Religious Americans also enjoy better physical health. They have an average life expectancy more than 7 years longer than those of the irreligious. In fact, much of the difference remains even after the effects of clean living are removed. Rodney Stark also talks about another topic we've discussed in previous commentaries, the fertility gap. The fertility rate for religious people is much higher than for secular people. He cites Eric Kaufman's book, Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth? That book points out that when you look at Europe, the population is declining, except in the religious sector. Despite what you might hear from atheists and skeptics, Christianity has been a blessing to America and the world. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Point of View Truth Team, Liberty or Tyranny.
Hi, this is Michael Ferris. I am the President, CEO, and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, and I've been friends with Point of View Radio for decades. This is such a great radio ministry. I'm personally a partner with Point of View, and I would encourage each of you to be a partner. Point of View gets information in a timely fashion to people who need to know the truth, and Point of View brings you the truth. It brings you a Christian perspective on the news, and it calls you to prayer and action in a timely manner. I'll never forget the day that freedom was preserved in the homeschool arena because of the work of Point of View Radio, leading the charge on that. And so always been grateful for that and would encourage you to be a part of the Point of View team. God bless you.
Great comments from Mike Ferris. And let me just mention again that we do have information on our website, Liberty or Tyranny. And if you click on there, you can certainly make your gift. And we are now joined by Gary Bauer because he has served, as we well know, under Ronald Reagan's administration as the Undersecretary of Education, Chief Domestic Policy Advisor. But we were talking, Chelsey, just a minute about some of the pro-life issues and pro-family issues. And Chelsey Youman in studio with me as well as Brad Fisk. But Gary Bauer, just great to have you on the program with us once again.
Well, it's always the highlight of my week and months when I'm on the program. So Thanks for the invitation, as always.
You're my eyes and ears up there in Washington, D.C., and if I go back and look at the Monday end-of-day report, and we always recommend listeners, if they're not subscribing to the end-of-day report, you remind us that, this president can not catch a break. If he says, okay, we're going to issue a travel advisory or even ban travel from China, then he's a xenophobe, but then if later on it looks like that was a good idea, nobody gives him credit. He was attacked originally for suggesting that maybe it would be good if we could have this all resolved by Easter. Then he changes his mind. So he's criticized for talking about getting everybody together at Easter in church, now attacked for changing his mind. And then, whether it's locking down the country, whether it's the idea of maybe quarantining various states, this president has received even more criticism than back in the days when Ronald Reagan received criticism, don't you think?
I do think that, and I was in that Reagan White House. So I can tell you it was pretty unpleasant then, and I felt like we probably had reached a low point in this sort of thing. But sadly, we have far surpassed it. This has been referred to as a war. The president has referred to this battle against the coronavirus as a war, and I think it is an apt comparison. And I think most Americans of both political parties, independents, et cetera, when they get up every day, they're thinking about, what can they do to fight the virus? Are they following the right advice? What else should we be doing, and so forth? But sadly, it sure seems to me that there's a big chunk of the media and quite a few leaders on the left that seem to be more at war with the president and with conservatives than they are with the virus. In fact, they're willing to undermine the war against this horrible virus in order to score cheap political points against the president, the vice president, conservatives, Christians, and so forth. It's really a new level of disgusting and scandalous in my view, and quite frankly, my admiration for the president goes up every day as he comes out and does that daily briefing. And I don't know what it is in his personality that leads him to keep taking one more question from those reporters, even though 9 out of 10 of them are downright absurd. And every new question he takes, I can tell you because I have the cuff on my arm, my blood pressure goes up 5 points. So before this is over, I'm going to have a pre-existing health condition, which will put me more at risk.
What a great line. Can I quote you? Because you also pointed out that there is a TV show right now that has record ratings, and it's the Trump coronavirus briefing. And I did not know that, which maybe explains why the other day, I think we were even talking about that with Rick Santorum and some others, that now National Public Radio said, maybe we don't want to cover this anymore because it's getting the kind of ratings that you get for Monday Night Football.
It does, and it is sort of like a football game. I mean, we've got a quarterback up there that seldom loses, and a bunch of tacklers that keep trying to throw cheap illegal blocks on him, and he just sort of smacks them away as if they're not even on the field. It's probably the best, the closest thing that we have to contact sports right now. But it is getting tremendous raise. Now, I don't think the average person can actually bring themselves to listen to it for 2 hours, but millions of Americans are tuning in, and that's a great thing.
Yeah. Brad Fisk with us. And Brad, of course, you've known Gary Bauer since the old Focus on the Family days and those kinds of things. But I've always appreciated Gary's perspective on all of that. And, of course, I know Gary's appreciated what we do here at Point of View.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Go ahead, Gary.
Go on. Well, I was going to say it's unmatched, and Point of View is needed now more than ever. A lot of Americans are stuck at home, depending on what kind of an order the governor has issued. Our governor in Virginia has said we can't leave the house until the middle of June. I don't know what he's thinking about. Nobody's got a deadline that late. But if you're there in your home these days, and there's so much fake news out there, Point of View is the antidote. Point of View is the place where you can get the true dope, the real information at a time when every American wants to know the latest about this issue and all the other challenges that our country and our leadership and our president are facing.
That's right. And, right now we are in our Truth Team Week, and we're asking folks to step aboard right now for that very reason that Gary just stated, because you're going to hear stuff here you'll hear nowhere else. And join the Truth Team. It's $1 a day, $360 for the year, and we would just invite you to step aboard for that, or even more if you can give. 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or you can give online at pointofview.net, pointofview.net. But take Gary's advice and join us. Want you to keep us strong. This voice of Point of View must continue.
Gary, let me just for a minute before we take a break talk about anti-Semitism. One of the things I'm holding up right now for those of you watching is our booklet on anti-Semitism, because we think this is a really big issue, and of course you have as well. But if again I can quote Gary Bauer, and that is, for some people they're so blinded by anti-Semitism that a good example of that is Iran. People are even attempting to spread the virus to Jewish communities. Chelsey has actually been working in the past as a lawyer to try to defend some of our Jewish friends. Then the one that just was a head shaker, and again, this comes from your end of day report, when the president offered to even provide assistance to those in Iran, which have suffered so greatly. I mean, China, Iran, Italy, some of those countries, they rejected that because, after all, they want nothing from the great Satan. That just amazes me in terms of some of the things that you've been reporting recently in your end-of-day report.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, anti-Semitism, it's an ancient evil. It manages to sink its roots in all kinds of places, on the far left, on the far right. It even makes its way, sadly, into some churches. Historically, that's happened. I'm proud today that American Christians are some of the biggest warriors and fighters against anti-Semitism. As you know, I was appointed by the president to be on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and for the first time, that commission, when we did a report on Iran recently, we not only commented on how they treat religious minorities in Iran, but we pointed out that Iran is a nation that regularly promises a second Holocaust. It literally is the reason the Islamic Republic of Iran exists, is to destroy the Jewish people and to destroy the nation of Israel. So this is a terrible evil, and all men and women of goodwill need to fight against it with every ounce of strength that we have.
We're going to take a break, and this would be a perfect time for you to make that phone call. We also want you to go to the website. You can see ouramericanvalues.org and find out more about Gary Bauer. And as you go there, pointofview.net, you can also give us your opportunity to give us perhaps the greatest and most significant gift that you can give. And so we would certainly appreciate that, your best gift. And, of course, we also would encourage you to make that phone call if you would like to do so. That number is 800-347-5151. Practicing social distancing. So actually, these are staff members at their own homes with our office phones. So as you call right now, they're just in their home waiting for you to give them a call. 800-347-5151. And we will come back and talk more with Gary Bauer about how you can get involved in Campaign 2020. All that coming up right after this.
What I'm about to say is not for everyone. If you've lost a job and wondering how you're going to provide for yourself and your family, it's not for you. Our prayers are with you. If you're one of our generous donors whose business has been hit hard by the current struggles, it's probably not for you. In recent days, we've seen so many victories for liberty, but those who value power above all else do not sleep during a crisis. They try to take advantage of it. You can help ensure that Point of View Radio is here as a source of good information and solid practical help in a time of great need. If you can, stand with us. by visiting pointofview.net/team. There you can read all about the benefits, whether you can give monthly or as a special investment at this critical time. Pointofview.net/team. During this difficult moment, let's make sure liberty wins. If you prefer to give by phone, please be patient. You can imagine things are a bit more challenged than usual. 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or again online, pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, don't forget that you can go to our website, pointofview.net, and let us know about how you would like to join with us. And, of course, the number 800-347-5151. We have, of course, on the phone with us for a little bit longer, Gary Bauer, as well as Brad Fisk. But in studio, Chelsey Youman, who is, of course, with Human Coalition, also the host of our Millennial Roundtable. And, Chelsey, of course, you've been paying attention to the abortion issue for some time. Look at what happened in the New York legislature, the Virginia governor, and those kinds of things. But I made kind of this list, and it goes on for a long way, so I won't read all of those, of what happens if instead you have a Democrat in the White House, a democratically controlled Senate and House. It's Medicare for all, it's Green New Deal, it's free college tuition, it's guaranteed basic income and a living wage of $15 an hour, it's government daycare, it's abortion till birth, it's the abolish the ICE, that is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ending the filibuster, packing the Supreme Court. There's a lot of issues here at stake in this election, and that's one of the reasons why I know you have been working to try to educate listeners and various donors to your organization as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's so much at stake. You know, I'm in the abortion movement or anti-abortion movement, really. But when I hear your list and I hear the Supreme Court, I also think, what about the lower courts and all those federal lifetime appointments? They're the ones, like this week in Austin, who decided, well, abortions are an exception to all the health care limitations. Well, the Fifth Circuit is full of now President Trump's appointees, and they ruled the opposite and overruled that lower court. And that's a perfect example of why we need conservative president, because we ultimately end up with a conservative judiciary who interprets the Constitution accurately with an originalist mindset. There's just so many things that are impacted by the next election that we as a society are not functioning the same right now, but we still have democracy, right? We still have democracy as a base root of our society to continue to vote with our conscience and keep our eye on all of those issues.
Gary, let's, if we can, talk about how this election may be even more significant, because you're talking about a president, you're talking about 34 Senate races, you're talking about 435 races to the House of Representatives. But today is April 1st, so that means everybody should have filled out or needs to fill out their census, and that means that your state legislators are going to eventually redraw those districts. And then Chelsey just mentioned, as a lawyer, the number of individuals, almost now 200 individuals that this president has been able to place on either the Supreme Court, the Circuit Court, or the federal courts. This is perhaps the most important election in our lifetime. Would you agree?
I do agree. You know, that's been sort of a throwaway line for many years. Both sides use it. This is the most important election, et cetera, et cetera. But every once in a while in a great country, an election comes along, and it is the most important election that's ever come along. You know, it might involve issues of war and peace or life and death or, you know, things that are really things that shake us to our core. I think in the election that the last presidential election we had, we got a reprieve. We were able to elect the president we have now, and he ended up filling 2 Supreme Court vacancies. If those vacancies had been filled by Hillary Clinton, the life issue, the religious liberty issues, those things would have been lost for so many decades. It's almost scary to think about it. But all we got from that election was a reprieve. A lot of progress has been made, but not enough to withstand, after just 4 years, a liberal, pro-abortion, anti-religious liberty president coming into office with 4 or 8 years, not only to reverse what President Trump and Vice President Pence have done, but then to move even further down the road that we've seen where the far left wants to take us. And I believe, without any fear of exaggeration, that if we elect that kind of liberal again, and that's what we're going to be facing, I'm not sure we will ever get the country back again on the things that we really care about. So every man and woman of faith has got to show up on Election Day. But I would argue even further than that, they've got to be listening to point of view. They've got to be involved. They've got to be talking to the young people in their family who may have been led astray at college or by the popular culture. I mean, don't just show up and vote. Find one other person that you will make as your project between now and Election Day to get them to understand the great issues that are facing our country.
You know, one of the ways, Brad, that we've been trying to educate people is not only on the air, but one of the things we're making available, as I've mentioned before, to our Truth Team listeners is this flash drive that has booklets and Outlook articles and programs and viewpoints on culture and family, on the economy, on life issues, on politics, on religious freedom and theology and apologetics. And because it has this little carabiner here, you can click it onto your belt loop or your purse, or I suggest that you send it off with any kid going off to high school or college, because if they're going to be involved in a debate about anything from same-sex marriage to capitalism and socialism or the deity of Jesus Christ, we got all that information there. And that's one of the things that we want to make available to any of our listeners that make a pledge during this Truth Team Week.
You know, we've never had a gift like this ever, and it is so loaded. It's like taking Kerby and everything he has said in the last, 3 decades or whatever, and just stuffing it on this thing. But it's very well organized, and again, it's $1 a day. Joining the Truth Team, $1 a day or more, and that flash drive is going to be yours, a gift from us to you as a thank you. So please, won't you join? Listen, you just heard Gary talking about what's coming up in the election. We really need to have the point of view voice as loud and as specific as possible to preserve our liberty. And the phone number, 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. It is so important, ladies and gentlemen. Please, please join us.
Gary, just before we let you go, let's, if we can, maybe answer the question in the back of some people's minds. Maybe you're just a little too extreme. You're saying that all this is going to happen, but we don't have any evidence of it. I would suggest that when we talked about the so-called CARES Act, the so-called stimulus bill, it looked like the United States Senate had come to an agreement, and even Chuck Schumer said this was very good bipartisan work. And then Nancy Pelosi showed up in town, and they started seeing this bill like a Christmas tree, and they wanted to put all sorts of ornaments on that. And since you're there in Washington, D.C., this sounded to me like something I remember somebody saying a long time ago, never let a serious crisis go to waste. And so I think we had a preview of coming attractions, didn't we?
Oh, I thought that was such a telling moment, Kerby. They were throwing really radical stuff in there about climate change, which has nothing to do with the battle against the coronavirus. They wanted to re-regulate all kinds of businesses. They were trying to roll back some of the tax provisions of the recent Tax Reform Act. But the thing that really jumped out at me, this was a piece of legislation that was supposed to help America defeat this virus and to get back on our feet economically. And it was a piece of legislation, and in its own way, that was trying to save lives. And what did Speaker Nancy Pelosi try to hide in that bill? She wanted to provide millions of additional dollars to Planned Parenthood. So while we're facing a virus that may at its peak take 2,500 lives a day over the next couple of weeks, every day in America, that's about the number of innocent unborn children that die at the hands of the abortionists. And Nancy Pelosi, in the middle of this battle, where she's accusing the president of not doing enough to save lives, she was trying to guarantee that the baby-killing industry continues to operate in the middle of this battle against the coronavirus. I thought it was telling. I thought it was disgusting, and I think she ought to be ashamed of herself.
Well, again, Gary, we certainly appreciate you joining with us today. And just as we leave and let you go back to the busyness of your life, any final comments to our listeners about supporting Point of View?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Look, Kerby, I've said this a couple of times. I want to say it again. Almost every month, I send out mail or an email to my followers around the country asking them to support me. We're at the beginning of a month, so they'll be getting that plea in the next couple of days. When you get it, do me a favor this month and just tear it up and send to Point of View, whatever you were planning on donating to American Values or my Political Action Committee Campaign for Working Families. We'll get the funds in, but we can't do our work in Washington unless there are places like Point of View and men like Kerby that give you the truth and the American people the truth so that we've got an informed electorate and we can win this battle for the heart and soul of America.
Gary, thank you so very much. Again, that number is 800-347-5151, or the website is pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Point of View Truth Team, Liberty, or Tyranny.
It has been about 25 years since God providentially led me to Point of View when I did not even know it existed. During this time, I have shared numerous taped programs with my family and incorporated the Outlook magazine and other articles into the homeschool curriculum I use in teaching our 5 children. Back 25 years ago, I had to put a big box radio with a recorder strategically in a corner so that I could hear that message. Point of View receives no government funding, for which I am grateful. It is therefore my honor, privilege, and responsibility to support this organization of tremendous self-sacrificing people on a monthly financial basis and to put courage into them through letters and specific prayers as they have become like family to me.
Nice comments from a very loyal listener over these many decades. And for just a few minutes, we want to spend some time talking with Chelsey once again. And one of the articles you and I have both read came from the Pew Research Center. Most Americans say the coronavirus outbreak has impacted their lives. And what they found is about 91%, or 9 out of 10 U.S. adults, say that given the situation right now, they would feel uncomfortable attending a crowded party. 3/4 said that they really would not right now want to eat out at a restaurant. And back to the election issue, they found that about 2/3 said right now they wouldn't feel comfortable going to a polling place. And so you got to think through some of that. But also I thought we might even talk about what's happening with some of these churches, because they found that most, 59%, say they really scaled back their attendance because of the coronavirus, in part because some of these churches or other houses of worship have canceled services. But they found that same percentage, 57%, report having watched religious services online. So it has really changed our world, but you've noticed some changes as well, haven't you?
Yes. I mean, I can't think of anybody that I know personally who hasn't been impacted greatly by this, not just in terms of their schedules or working from home and whatnot, but I know multiple people who either have lost their jobs or have had to quit because of the nature of their job was not one that was going to keep them safe. I know family members who've lost, major financial investments. That's just the economic side. But to think through the healthcare side, in Texas, there was an article that came out that hospitals are sending women home the next day after C-sections. Well, wow. I'm due for a child in 6 weeks. So, that had my attention. And I know somebody personally this week who was released the day after her C-section. So this means not just our sacrifices being made on the economic side, but even in terms of like the healthcare being received, and healthcare you're eligible to receive. So you're down to one visitor at the hospital now, and some hospitals in New York, we've all heard, had no visitors, including dad, for the birth of children. And so these are significant sacrifices everybody's making and most willingly to. But we have to keep that in mind. I've heard stories of terminally ill people not being able to have any visitors. And it's a shame that's where we're at. But yes, sacrifices are being made across the board, certainly.
And again, I might just point you to our website today. The first article is How the Virus Has Affected Our Lives, and that comes from Pew Research, and just fascinating to see all of that. But the second article I want to mention for just a minute, and then we'll go to Brad, is this one which was entitled Setting a Precedent. Now, this comes from Andrew Stettaford, and he originally was really talking about what happens in the UK, although now I've got some very good pieces by Dr. Merrill Matthews, who you know, on this. But he points out that one of the Supreme Court justices in the UK said, the real problem is that when human societies lose their freedom, it's not usually because tyrants have taken it away. It's usually because people willingly surrender their freedom in return for protection against some external threat. And the threat is usually a real threat, sometimes exaggerated, but they don't necessarily pause to consider what that might mean. And it's a little bit similar to a conversation I had with some other smart women around this table, Penna Dexter and Debbie Georgiadis, about the fact that right now, and you're a lawyer, you've watched this, and maybe a student of history like I am, we recognize how important all of this is, but we also recognize there is going to be a time where we hope that the government will pull back. And yet some of those individuals would love to implement martial law and would love to have a top-down kind of enforcement from the federal government to the states, right?
Right. And we even heard President Trump say this a couple of weeks ago. If the healthcare industry had their way, the entire country would be on lockdown and at a standstill. And so I do think the narrative at the beginning was a little bit of a dichotomy. You were either selfish for going out or a hero for staying home, right? It's got to be both that black and white. But I think it's okay to ask some questions here and say, what as a society are we willing to sacrifice, or for how long? Maybe that's the right question. But Is it democracy itself? Elections are already delayed. Is it health care for other individuals, well, who makes those determinations about who is deserving or not enough of certain levels of health care? There's just some big questions here. That worship, the right to worship. Now we know temporarily we are in a luxury of society where we can log on online and worship, but I think it's okay to ask those questions and say for how long, and then also how much can we trust people to self-govern here? If my parents have an autoimmune issue, or my mother-in-law is at high risk, so they're taking very, very strong precautions. I'm pregnant, so we're taking strong precautions, but I can make those decisions for our family with the knowledge we have. Whereas some people might have to go to their job and not have that choice at the grocery store to eat, right? So we as a society, I think, can in some ways be asking these questions, and it doesn't have to be the dichotomy of you're right or wrong or selfish or don't care about your neighbor. I think that we have to have a lot of grace with each other right now as we grapple with these questions.
Brett, I was just thinking, the theme here is liberty or tyranny. We were just seeing that as the difference between a free market republic versus those who wanted a socialistic top-down government. But this has added a new wrinkle to this idea of liberty versus tyranny, and why I posted this second article and then one on federalism and the corona lockdown, because we will be talking about this in the future, making sure that we don't give up liberty for security. 2 Timothy 1:7 says that we should not have a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And we need to apply that. And I think it applies very much to some of the things we're talking about even today during our Truth Team Week.
It is. And by the way, it is Truth Team Week. And what that means is we're inviting you to come aboard as a financial supporter of the ministry. We have a Truth Team kind of entry level of $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 for the year. And you do not have to have that money in hand right now. You might even want to use the checks coming from the government here soon for many of you. But here's the important part, is to give us a call and make your financial support of at least $1 a day, $360 for the year at 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. And, you might actually have the capacity to give $1,000 or $2,000. We had a $3,000 gift yesterday. You know what? Those are important. They all work together. But if you can't do that, that's okay. $1 a day is a great entry level. 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You can give there as well. Kirby?
And I might just mention that we are hoping that some of you may be able to step up. We recognize some listening right now have lost their jobs, and they're looking forward to getting a $1,200 check per individual, $2,400 for a couple. But some of you might say, I'm already getting a paycheck, and that money is going to be coming in pretty soon, and it might be an opportunity to give some of that back to this ministry. So as we go to a break, this is a perfect time for you to call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. We have staff at home with our office phones waiting for your phone call. Or, of course, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, 1-800-347-5151.
I don't know about you, but I'm having trouble keeping track of what day it is. But here's what I do know. This week is very important in keeping good information flowing in the fight for liberty against tyranny. And the days are going by quickly. Again, if you've lost a job recently or your business has been hit hard, this is not for you. We're praying that God provides for you and has mercy to get things back to a sense of normal. But if you can, your investment today can help us preserve recent gains and stand tall against those who would try to use this crisis to advance their agenda. We need to hear from you right now. Monthly support is a lifeblood for us, but whether you can give monthly or make a special gift, please give right now. All the details are online at pointofview.net/team. And if you haven't been there lately or ever, after you give, look around. We have a lot of resources there. pointofview.net/team. Or by phone, 1-800-347-5151. Do your part for liberty. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
This hour, we're going to spend some time in just a few minutes talking with our good friend Eric Metaxas. But before we do so, let me cover real quickly some of the material we've posted on our website, pointofview.net. You heard us talk a little bit last hour about the very good Pew Research Center. Most Americans say the coronavirus outbreak has impacted their lives. And matter of fact, sometime later this week, or maybe even we'll get into it next week, there have been some people writing about how that may even change the way church services are done and a variety of other things. So one of the articles that I think you will find very helpful, and if you'd like to print out the entire article, it's about 10 pages, but it is a great and perhaps the most thorough survey of what is happening right now in people's lives. And I gave you just a few very quick comments from a very detailed survey, which I think you might find interesting. Number two, interestingly enough, almost all the articles I'm starting to pull together are starting to ask really important questions about, well, when does this end? What's the end game? Are we setting a precedent? And that's our second article, which also kind of bleeds into the third article that I wanted to mention for just a minute, and that is by Walter Olson, Federalism and the Coronavirus Lockdown. And then after I posted that, I also found one by our own Dr. Merrill Matthews, who's been on the program many times, Can Federalism Survive the Coronavirus? Both of them are reminding us that maybe one of the ways to make sure that we don't lose our liberty, since the theme this week is liberty versus tyranny, is to go back to the reality that we actually have a federal system. It's a system in which the national government, as he points out, has certain enumerated powers, but the rest of the powers are actually reserved for the states and the people. And he, in his piece, really points out the fact that the states are where the action is for a variety of reasons. They have probably the best understanding of their resources, understanding of the various hazards, even understanding what the priorities might be. And so in some respects, recognizing that this federal system really puts a lot more responsibility in the hands of governors and mayors and those kinds of individuals who are the closest to the real action. But Dr. Merrill Matthews even quotes from Ann Applebaum, and I'm going to go back and find this article in The Atlantic, pointing out that if we have our system, we may have protection, but as we look across the globe, she says that around the world, rulers are using this pandemic as an excuse to grab more power, and the public is going along with it. So it's a good illustration, once again, that because we are in a constitutional republic, and frankly, right now, because we have a president and a vice president and members of Congress that recognize this federal system, we may not fall prey to how some might misuse this. But again, let me encourage you to go to the website, pointofview.net, and find these articles, because it's a theme that we've mentioned before. I know we will come back to it on Friday with Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford, but you can find these articles very easily on our website, pointofview.net.
Point of View Truth Team.
I just want to commend you guys on your program. I love listening to you.
I want to say, first of all, that I really enjoyed the Millennial Roundtable, and I love the program altogether. I think Kerby is great, and I really appreciate all that y'all do, and the truth that y'all put out.
I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show.
Point of View is actually a lifeline for me, and I'm actually a third-generation Point of View listener. I homeschool my girls, and I don't think I could do what I do without Point of View on a daily basis. Without ministries like Point of View, we really don't have much hope for the future of our children, our grandchildren. They just really help on a daily basis protect the freedoms that we enjoy today. I can't see a better way to invest in our future than to support Point of View.
Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it. Not only that, I want to encourage everybody listening to donate, because without our donations, I know that y'all won't be able to stay on the air, and it's just, I don't know where we get this kind of information if it wasn't from y'all.
Point of View Truth Team.
You know, lots of times we say that you probably won't find this information other places. In just some of the conversation we had today with Chelsey and with Gary, well, maybe you could hear some of that at other places, but we focused a lot more on the pro-life issue. But another good example of that is even my commentary today called Christianity's Blessings. It's based on a book by Rodney Stark, which reminds us that there has been such a blessing to this nation because of you Christians out there. And how many times have you ever heard that? Rodney Stark points out that religious people dominate the ranks of blood donors. Right now, during the coronavirus, we need blood donors. And they have found that the people that are most likely to give tend to be religious people, more conservative people. And he even points out that religious people, because of those blood donations, have even helped the angry humanists leave their lives. And that's the subtitle of the book, America's Blessing, How Religion Benefits Everyone, Including Atheists. Now, you're not going to hear that on MSNBC. You're not going to hear that on CBS. You're not going to hear that on CNN. But you do hear it on Point of View. And Brad Fisk with me, one of the reasons why we come to people twice a year is to remind them that we are listener-supported. And we do cover a lot of issues that I just don't think you hear anywhere else, even in other talk radio programs.
I agree, and not only looking behind at the legacy, almost 5 decades, but we're looking ahead. Folks, we are coming up on an election, we've been talking about that last hour, that could change the course of this country, not for the good, but for the worst, if the wrong people get elected. And so we would like to be a source, as we always have. We want to encourage you and equip you to do the work and understand the issues from a biblical point of view. And you can join the Truth Team and support us as little as $1 a day. And that's $360 for the year. And we have some gifts we'll have Kerby talk about in a moment. But it's important right now to understand to join the Truth Team. The phones are open, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. You can give on the website at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. This is the time to give and to join the Truth Team. And maybe you could even give $100 a month. That's $1,200 for the year. That's really doable because the check from the CARE Act that just passed is going to be a $1,200 check for an individual and $2,400 for a couple. So 1-800-347-5151.
And I might just mention that you want to make that call right now because we'll be talking with Eric Metaxas in just a minute, talking about some of the accomplishments of Donald Trump. First, we'll get kind of an on-the-ground kind of comment about what's happening in New York City, which is where he lives. So that's all the more reason for you to give us a call, 800-347-5151. And, of course, we've mentioned the flash drive, which is just chock full of great information. Also, the Joel Rosenberg book, which we're making available simply because Joel Rosenberg was going to be on the program, and we purchased a lot of copies of it and want to give that to you as a gift, as a thank you. So, again, make your call right now. You don't want to miss Eric Metaxas, 800-347-5151. Website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Whether you are a Christian or not, you are benefiting from the positive impact of Christianity on your life. That's the premise of the book by Dr. Rodney Stark, America's Blessings, How Religion Benefits Everyone, Including Atheists. His book is a perfect response to atheistic professors who criticize America and the Christian foundation of this country. This book is a natural one for the professor to write since he has talked about the positive contribution of Christianity to Western civilization. Since we live in a country that Stark believes is unusually religious, we shouldn't be surprised that many of the blessings that Christianity has brought to the world can be found in America. He says people who attend church tend to donate more than others. In previous commentaries, I've talked about the research by Arthur Brooks that found the same things. Rodney Stark says that religious people dominate the ranks of blood donors, to whom even some angry humanists owe their lives. Christians also are far more likely to contribute even to secular charities, to volunteer their times for socially beneficial programs, and to be active in civic affairs. Religious Americans also enjoy better physical health. They have an average life expectancy more than 7 years longer than those of the irreligious. In fact, much of the difference remains even after the effects of clean living are removed. Rodney Stark also talks about another topic we've discussed in previous commentaries, the fertility gap. The fertility rate for religious people is much higher than for secular people. He cites Eric Kaufman's book, Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth? That book points out that when you look at Europe, the population is declining, except in the religious sector. Despite what you might hear from atheists and skeptics, Christianity has been a blessing to America and the world. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Point of View Truth Team, Liberty or Tyranny.
And back once again, we are in the midst of our Truth Team Week and now have an opportunity to talk with Eric Metaxas, individual that you probably know only so well. He's been on the program with us many times before, and we've talked about some of his books like Martin Luther and Bonhoeffer, Amazing Grace, Miracles. We've even talked about some of his more humorous books, Donald Drains the Swamp, Donald Builds the Wall, and of course some of his most recent books, Seven Men and the Secret of Their Greatness, and now Seven More Men. And of course he's the host of the creatively titled The Eric Metaxas Show. So, Eric Metaxas, always great to have you on the program with us today.
Well, great to hear your voice, Kerby. It's been a little while. It's just, it's a beautiful day in New York City, and if you don't pay attention, you forget that you're under quarantine, which is always a good thing.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about New York City. I saw your video the other day where you go out there and there's nobody out there, which is amazing. And then later I want to talk about some of the Trump accomplishments, but be our eyes and ears for just a minute because all of our attention right now has been on New York City. We have been thrilled to see a ship coming into the harbor. We've been thrilled to see tents being built in Central Park. But what is going on right now in the city?
Well, I will tell you, first of all, from my point of view, all is well. A lot of what you're hearing is, I'm sure, true, but at the same time, just because somebody lives in New York, I don't want people to think like it's chaos here. The streets are empty. People are staying put as they're supposed to. It really is okay from that point of view. And I have to say, the only time I get out of the house is to go for a run in Central Park or north of that. And I have to tell you, today, a couple of hours ago, I went out for my run, and I passed Samaritan's Purse, Franklin Graham's organization, set up a field hospital in East Meadow, right across from Mount Sinai, right in Central Park. And I was just stunned, like, there it is. And I talked my way in, and they gave me a tour of it. So I'm going to put that on my Twitter feed and my Instagram, the little video I made, because it is so encouraging to see God's people doing God's work right here in secular blue state New York City. It is undeniably moving and beautiful to your average New Yorker. And I have to say, it just thrills me. And I think the bigger theme that I'm seeing during this time is, you know, what the enemy intends for evil, God can turn to good. And God's people have been turning to him in extraordinary ways and numbers. And I think you've got a lot of people praying who weren't praying. And I see the beginnings of revival coming out of this. I really do believe that this is one of those clarifying moments. It's unprecedented in most of our lives. We've never lived through anything like this unless people remember World War II. But even that, you know, unless you were experiencing it in Europe, this is a bizarre time for most of us. But I simply see God's hand in a way that I've not seen. I'm even beginning some of my radio programs with me praying on the air. I have never done anything like that. But I just thought people are hurting. People are losing jobs. People need to know that God hears our prayers. We're not alone. This is not something that's just happening. And so I generally have been very encouraged, to be quite honest, during this time.
One of the things we actually put on our website is from the Pew Research, and it finds that more than half of all U.S. adults say they've prayed for an end of the coronavirus. And, of course, a large majority, even more so, pray daily. And that's not only Christians, but as I look down the list, Eric, we even have people who acknowledge that they seldom or never pray are now praying. Right. So maybe there is a possibility there that the things that you and Greg, Laurie, and others have talked about, that this could be another great awakening, and I certainly want to pray in that regard, and that's very encouraging as well.
Yes, I really do think so. I think there's things going on right now. Mike Lindell talking about prayer in the Rose Garden at the White House, which zillions of Americans watched that, and then the silly controversy over it. To have Franklin Graham's organization right here in Central Park. There are things happening that would not normally be happening. And I think we're just going to see more and more of it. And I really, I believe that God is going to be glorified even through this difficulty. I'm really, as I say, genuinely encouraged. I'm so moved to think that Franklin Graham Samaritan's Purse has set up this hospital right here, where I can walk to it. And it's just things are happening, Kerby. Things are happening.
Eric Metaxas with us, and we have a link, first of all, to his website, ericmetaxas.com. Also have a link to his Twitter feed and Facebook page, and that's where you can find some of those things that we've been talking about. And, one of the things that I've been trying to emphasize on this program, and I know you do on your radio program, is we should have faith, not fear. 2 Timothy 1:7 says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but instead of power and love and a sound mind or self-control. So it seems to me that as talk show hosts, we are certainly wanting to calm individuals and be a source of encouragement and hope in the midst of some kind of questionable issues that are unfolding right before our very eyes.
Well, see, that's the thing. Something like this forces you to examine your faith. What kind of faith do you have? It's easy to say you believe, in something. It's easy to say, like, well, if you want to know what I believe, go to the website of my church, and they've got a statement of faith, and that's what I believe. Well, God's not fooled by that. He's looking at your life. He hears your thoughts. And are we believing him and his word or not? And it's amazing when you think about what Scripture says. I mean, it says, be anxious for nothing. That's not sort of a pat you on the head, nice idea. It's a command from Scripture. Be anxious for nothing. God has things under control. So you just go to him in prayer with your problems. That's a command. It's not extra credit. That's basic faith. Do you believe he's real and hears you, or don't you? And by the way, He wants you to believe for your sake, not for his sake. God's not depending on us, but he wants us to depend on him. And so I'm just fascinated at the scriptures that lately I've been thinking of, even the one, all things work together for good for those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. All things, even the coronavirus, even people dying, all things. It says all things. Do we believe that that's the word of God, that that's eternally true or not? And I think we need to be challenged in that way so that we're able to say, hey, wait a minute, you know what? I wasn't really believing that. I was being anxious for a lot of things, and God will not honor that. God will not bless that. I have to take what he says in that book seriously because it's eternal and it's true. It is truth. So this is it's just an interesting time just for that.
Eric Metaxas with us, but I might also mention that we have by phone Brad Fisk, who, of course, reminds us from time to time about the fact that we're in the midst of our Truth Team Week.
Yeah, we do this twice a year. We come to you and we simply remind you we are listener-supported Christian radio. That means we are dependent on your gifts. You know, many are out of work, unable to give right now, or we got to keep the voice of Point of View very, very strong because we're going into a season maybe past the virus time when we get into the elections. And we have a team that you can join at $1 a day, $360 for the year, $30 a month. You don't have to have the money right now in hand, but we're asking you to give us a call and make your pledge and join the Truth Team. 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. You can also give online any time of the day or night, pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Come on, you guys, join the Truth Team. We need you to stand with us right now.
And Eric, when we come back from the break, I want to chat with you for just a few minutes about some of the accomplishments of this administration, because we are in the midst of campaign 2020. And we had a guest in studio just within the last hour just say, you know, when I was thinking about who I would vote for president almost 4 years ago, it was a time in which I did have some questions. And then I remember reading this piece by Eric Metaxas that caused me to kind of rethink all of my priorities in that regard, and finally decided to indeed vote for him. But I think especially given some of the things that have unfolded in the last couple of weeks, we forget some of the accomplishments in terms of the economy. We can talk about the judiciary, we can talk about foreign policy and all of the rest. So when we come back, I want to spend some time talking about that with Eric Metaxas. But also, as we go to the break, we certainly want to encourage you to go to the website, pointofview.net, 1-800-347-5151. And for those of you watching online, I'm holding up our flash drive. This has, as I said, a carabiner, but most importantly, it has just an incredible amount of material, 16 different magazine articles from Outlook, 19 of our best programs, 11 hours worth of content, 24 of my radio commentaries, a dozen of these booklets. That's one of the things we want to put in your hand for your gift of as little as $1 a day, $30 a month. So again, as we go to a break right now, this would be a perfect time to call 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
What I'm about to say is not for everyone. If you've lost a job and wondering how you're going to provide for yourself and your family, it's not for you. Our prayers are with you. If you're one of our generous donors whose business has been hit hard by the current struggles, it's probably not for you. In recent days, we've seen so many victories for liberty, but those who value power above all else do not sleep during a crisis. They try to take advantage of it. You can help ensure that Point of View Radio is here as a source of good information and solid practical help in a time of great need. If you can, stand with us by visiting pointofview.net/team. There you can read all about the benefits, whether you can give monthly or as a special investment at this critical time. Pointofview.net/team. During this difficult moment, let's make sure liberty wins. If you prefer to give by phone, please be patient. You can imagine things are a bit more challenged than usual. 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or again online, pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Eric Metaxas. And again, we're part of this Truth Team Week. And this is just a great opportunity to encourage you to support this ministry. And it has always been kind of a one-way communication. We talk to you, but this is one chance we get to actually hear from you. And Eric Metaxas with us for a little bit longer, author of so many very good books. But Eric, also, I might just call upon you as a talk show host for a minute, host of the Eric Metaxas Show. We are encouraging people to support this ministry. What would you say to our listeners in terms of why they should support something like Point of View?
Well, I'm glad you're letting me say something about it, because you know I feel strongly about what you do and this kind of radio in general. What I do is not quite the same thing, but it's close. But what you do, Kerby, I think people don't realize that we're living in a culture. To live in a free culture means that nothing is mandated, not the truth. Sometimes people try to mandate things that are not true, but it is up to us to help spread the truth. If we don't do it, the lies win. And what you have been doing for so many years is vital. You'll never know until you get to glory how many people have been touched in various ways. So some people extremely dramatically, some people just nudged in the right direction so that later on down the line they were open to something that God had for them. And I think people forget that in a free culture, it's up to us. We, the people, have to step up and do the right thing. The government is not providing the truth for us on PBS or on National Public Radio. They may think that they're helping, but we know that more than anything, they're hurting. And so I just, whenever I encounter something like your program and somebody like you, I want to exhort everyone I know to understand that they have to help support it. It's a duty. We pay our taxes, and we often are finding out that they're being used for things with which we disagree. I think we have to do our duty as private citizens and support those things that we know are helping. So I feel strongly about this, so I'm just glad that I got to say a word about it.
Well, thank you. Let's, if we can, for just a minute, because you have had a chance to be with this president more than most of our listeners have. And at the same time, I think we are going to very quickly forget about all the things in terms of the accomplishments that came down in terms of the economy. But, of course, we have sometimes talked about the judiciary, whether it is moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, whether it's actually coming up with a trade deal. What about that? Because you've had a chance to be with this president and hear some of the individuals talking about his accomplishments. Before we forget all of those, can you give us just a few that come to mind?
Well, I'll tell you, even before we get into that, his leadership right now I find extraordinary. When I see him standing at that podium and taking questions, the thing, you can't really take a course on how to be a leader. There's some people that just they have these innate leadership abilities, and then somehow, by God's grace, they're trained and shaped so that they really can use those abilities. But when I see him doing what Churchill did, I don't want to compare him too directly to Churchill, but the point is that it's not easy to get people who are down, who are being crushed, to see the positive side of things. It's not easy to put steel in people's spines. He really understands that even though we have to be realistic and we have to talk about what's wrong, we have to be positive. We have to stress, that we're America, and because of who we are, we'll get through this, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, that's a very rare thing among presidents and among leaders. And I cringe to think, where would we be right now if we had, I can think of all kinds of other people in that position. He seems to exude a kind of confidence, and, that's really what's behind everything that he does. I don't think that there's anything much to say about it. He's just somebody that he believes in a lot of the same things that, it's reality, right? He believes in cutting taxes and regulations so that the market and so the businesses can thrive, and so the economy can thrive. All of that kind of stuff, it's basic. But we're living in a time where a lot of people don't believe in this basic stuff. So the fact that we have a president who understands a lot of these things and who is very friendly to the values of, we evangelicals, it's huge. I think a lot of times people don't seem to understand how huge that is, and they criticize this or they criticize that. And I have to say that I've been amazed, frankly, in the last 3 years at some of the things that he has done. But I really think that with regard to religious liberty and, understanding that side of American freedom, which is, frankly, it's at the very core of all our freedoms, he'd be the last guy I would have expected to get it. And he gets it better than anyone I can think of who's been in the Oval Office. That's a huge thing. We need to really try to wrap our heads around that.
And I think it, in some respects, also is just an incredible compliment from you, who, I don't know, you didn't end up necessarily thinking you were going to be a biographer. I met you before you had even written, I think, Amazing Greats, and then, of course, Bonhoeffer and Martin Luther. Now you have not only 7 men and the secret of greatness, now you have 7 more men. And so in some respects, you, more than most, have seen the leadership skills and even the failings of a number of individuals. So in some respects, that's kind of high praise from an individual that has been a biography over those years. Yeah.
I was going to say it's kind of, and human beings are very complicated, so that, Trump, we need to say this, every time we praise Trump. He's not Jesus. He's a sinner. He's done a lot of things that I know are wrong. But when you're looking at the kind of leadership that he has given and the kinds of things he's done since he's been in office, it is undeniably staggering. It's a gift from God. I mean, I can't really. If you go back 5 or 10 years, the idea that under Obama we were going to probably elect Hillary Clinton and limp away from all of the robust freedoms that we had and the things that most Americans, frankly, take for granted, don't really ever think about. The idea that we've been given a president, who understands the founding principles innately. I don't know how well he could talk about it, but I have to say he lives it out in terms of his policies. And that is just a gift. It's a gift. And I think that, there are times when you can see that somebody was born for this hour. And I would say that God put him there for this hour. And often we need to remind ourselves, all through Scripture, we've all heard sermons on it, God chooses the least. God chooses the most dramatic example. He tells Gideon, we only need 300. I want to show you that I'm the one doing it. I want to show you. So I'm going to pick somebody very flawed so that you will see, that I'm the one that's doing it. And to confound those who are particularly religious or Pharisaical, to confound them and to say, you don't know me as well as you think you did. I think we're seeing something like that with this president.
Well, again, Eric Metaxas has been with us, and I might just, again, as I mentioned before, we've talked in the past with you about 7 men and the secret of greatness. Now you have 7 more men, and we'll get those topics maybe in the future, because I always love to chat with you. And you have become quite the biographer, but for people that have known you for any length of time know that we can also go back to Veggie Tales, and if you want some kids programs, Donald drains the swamp and Donald builds the house.
I've been all over the map. And the new book, just to be clear, because I should have mentioned at the beginning, but I have a new book called 7 More Men.
7 More
Men.
Men.
It's a continuation of my series, 7 Men, 7 Women. Now we have 7 More Men. It is out like next week, and it's 7 heroes, very flawed in many cases, but some real heroes, George Whitefield and George Washington Carver, Martin Luther, just all kinds of extraordinary individuals. And the book is out. I hope people will check it out. And frankly, it's hard not to be inspired by their lives. So I recommend it because of that, not because I wrote it.
Well, again, I would say that if you go to our website right now, pointofview.net, click on the picture of Eric Metaxas, we have a link to the book 7 More Men, and it's available in hardback and also in audiobook and all sorts of other formats. So it is there already. And, of course, we have a link to your website, which is ericmetaxas.com. And, of course, we have a link to both the Facebook and Twitter page. So, Eric Metaxas, always great to have you on the program with us.
My pleasure, Kirby. God bless you.
Just before we take a break, Brad, we have just a minute before we take a break here, but that's a good time to remind people that we're waiting for their phone call.
It is. It's Truth Team Week. We do this twice a year, and this is one of the 2 times. And I want to make it very clear. A gift of any amount, single gift, monthly gift, is so welcomed. Everybody doing their part. But the sweet spot, $1 a day. $360 for the year is your commitment. You don't have to have the money in hand right now. And you can also think about maybe using some of the checks we're going to be getting from the government if you're one of those. But you know what? Here's the phone number, 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. It's about a 2 to 3 minute call. Give us a call. Join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net is the other way to give. Pointofview.net.
Be right back.
Point of View Truth Team, Liberty or Tyranny.
Back once again, just for a few more minutes, and let me just mention again that one of the verses we've used so often, and we've even heard Eric Metaxas mentioning that, is Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And certainly we want to be your lifeline. And I know this is possibly an anxious time, but also recognize, as we've had a chance to chat with some of you off air, that you're actually maybe listening to Point of View more than ever because you're stuck at home. You may be one of those groups of individuals that are in something that is approximating lockdown. Now, I recognize that about a third of the country are in counties where there are no coronavirus outbreaks, but that is perhaps the exception rather than the rule. So again, one of the things we want to make available to you are the various articles we've posted. And I mentioned just a minute ago that we have this very good summary by Pew Research, a very extensive survey reminding us that all of us have seen that this coronavirus outbreak has impacted our lives and how that's changed our view of church, how it's changed our view of whether we'd want to go to a crowded place or whether we'd even like to go to a poll place to vote. This is going to be a big issue that we'll be talking about here on Point of View. And then a couple of other articles that we've posted on the setting of a precedent and even how maybe the fact that we have a federalist system might protect us from something that would look like tyranny. And so those are some important issues that we are trying to address. And just as a program note, let me just mention that tomorrow we'll have Oliver North with us, and we'll be talking about a number of other issues as it relates to the political issue. But again, I hope that you'll go to our website, pointofview.net, because you're going to find lots of great articles there.
Point of View Truth Team.
Oh, I thank God for what you're doing on Point of View. You guys have more influence across this country than I believe any of them in terms of tackling the issues and getting the truth out to Americans. It's getting to the point where truth just is bottled up on every hand. Every time you turn around, there's another big bottleneck against truth. I hope your listeners realize what Point of View is doing and supports Point of View in every possible way you can.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
I always wanted to give because I thought that Point of View really brings a lot of things in out here in the open that you don't hear anywhere else. And I knew when I was hearing on there, well, I could count on it being something that you could check into it and the proof would be there. You know, I didn't have to wonder, well, where did they make that stuff up from? I just know that it's going to be facts. That's what I call true journalism and putting the stuff out. I really think that's great.
Point of View Truth Team.
I like what one of the callers was saying. I would like to be able to express this viewpoint and know where it came from. And this is why I just mentioned a minute ago, 3 of the articles we've posted. You know, one of the things, Brad, that if you actually use our search engine and type in a keyword, and it could be anything, it could be abortion, it could be same-sex marriage, it could be messianic prophecy, it could be capitalism, socialism, whatever. You just, it's just amazing how much material is there. And of course, my viewpoints commentary or an attempt to try to summarize it in something that I actually broadcast to lots of radio stations around the country for about 2 minutes each particular day. And then the other thing I just thought we might mention is, since we are talking about the fact that we're in a campaign 2020 taking place right before our very eyes, we have a link under our Take Action section, which links you to iVoterGuide.com, which has been important for some of our listeners who actually have been voting in their primaries. I know some of our listeners are in primaries that have not taken place and have been postponed, but the most important election, of course, is going to be in November. And we try as much as possible to give you more than just the information about president or senator or Congress. Work your way down and to give you all sorts of other great information so that you can make an intelligent choice, because those particular elections that we will be a part of, from the federal, state, and local, are going to affect your lives. And that's why we think this is perhaps, as Gary Bauer said just a while ago, the most important election in our lifetime.
That's right. And, you know, this could be the most vitriolic election of all time. It could be an incredible media outpouring of, I'll say, lies and hate. And that is so important to understand what truth is. And that is why we exist, to tell the truth every day, no matter how hard or easy it is. But we depend on you to continue to have this voice. So strategic for you to join the Truth Team right now because of the upcoming election season. Here's the phone number to join the Truth Team at $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 for the year, and of course a gift of any amount would be welcome. But that Truth Team, you're going to get the free gifts of the book and you're also going to get the flash drive. 800-347-5151, 1-800-347-5151, and you can also donate at pointofview.net. Kerby?
One more time, let me mention that today is April 1st, and that is significant because, after all, this is the day that is chosen to determine the census. Now, many of you perhaps in the mail have already received some envelope that said United States Census 2020, and I would encourage all of our listeners to Point of View to fill that out for a couple of reasons. First of all, we need to get an accurate count in each locality in each state, so that's going to be important. But more importantly, it brings me back to a point I made just a minute ago. It's not just important who you vote for president, Senate, or the House of Representatives, but also who you're going to vote for your state legislator, because we are required by the Constitution, of course, every 10 years to carry on a census. And then that will be used by your state legislature to determine all sorts of things, the lines for your members of Congress, your state legislature, your state board of education, your various courts. And as you might imagine, it's going to be pretty contentious, back to what you mentioned just a minute ago, Brad, because, of course, Democratic legislators are going to want to draw lines so they would have more Democratic districts. Republicans are going to want boundaries that are going to maybe elect more Republicans. But more than that, there are all sorts of state laws that require districts to follow county lines. It's going to be important in terms of trying to keep cities and towns and school districts together. You have the Voting Rights Act. And so the first step of this is for you to make sure you fill out the census, but number two, to pay attention all the way down that ballot, because the people that you're going to elect, even to your state legislature, are going to determine how those districts are going to be drawn. There are some commissions that do that, but most of the time it's done by the legislature, and then there'll be court cases, and we're going to be covering all of that. And those are important issues because they are going to determine, in some respects, the laws and the policies that will affect you, your children, and even your grandchildren. So that's why April 1st is very important, so make sure you fill out that census today.
And we're not fooling. That number,
So again,
800-347-5151. Come on, you guys, join the Truth Team.
And again, that's just one of the kinds of things we want to try to talk about here on Point of View. Some of you might just say, gosh, I didn't hear that on the mainstream media. I think they're going to be all talking about the coronavirus. As important as that is, we certainly have talked about it today. There are other issues that we talk about that nobody else talks about. Even my Viewpoints commentary today about how Christianity has been such a blessing to this country and to the world, highlighting a book by Dr. Rodney Stark on that subject. So as we say goodbye today, let me mention that I really want you to listen tomorrow. We're going to be talking with, of course, Oliver North. I might even play some clips that we're doing in another program with Leanne Jameson about how she and others in the Pregnancy Resource Center are using these opportunities to reach out to abortion-minded women. So we'll be talking about all sorts of important issues. But as we go off the air, you can still give us a call. We'll still answer the phone, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. And, of course, at any time, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. Brad, thank you for joining us. Tomorrow we'll be back here on Point of View.
I don't know about you, but I'm having trouble keeping track of what day it is. But here's what I do know. This week is very important in keeping good information flowing in the fight for liberty against tyranny. And the days are going by quickly. Again, if you've lost a job recently or your business has been hit hard, this is not for you. We're praying that God provides for you and has mercy to get things back to a sense of normal. But if you can, your investment today can help us preserve recent gains and stand tall against those who would try to use this crisis to advance their agenda. We need to hear from you right now. Monthly support is a lifeblood for us, but whether you can give monthly or make a special gift, please give right now. All the details are online at pointofview.net/team. And if you haven't been there lately or ever, after you give, look around. We have a lot of resources there. pointofview.net/team. Or by phone, 1-800-347-5151. Do your part for liberty. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.